Guys, it's time for us to do something that's long overdue. As of this recording, our original review of Star Comes to Earth is now unlisted. You can find a link to it in the description if you want to see it.
The reason that we're doing this is because at the time that we originally had done the video, we were really busy that week and we rushed the scripts and did not give ourselves a lot of time to think about the episode before actually reviewing it.
Because of this, the video we put out talking about this episode wasn't very good, and considering how many views it got, a lot of people who saw it probably got the impression that we aren't very good at making videos. We found this video to be very weak compared to the rest of our content, and we don't want anyone else's first impression of us to be one of our worst videos. So I hope you can understand why we don't want this review to be visible on YouTube searches anymore.
And to be clear, we didn't do this because we got hate comments. We did it because we ourselves thought that the video was not very good, not counting other people's thoughts.
So what we're going to do in this video is try and set this to rights. First, we're going to talk about the episode itself and give it an actually fair review. Then, we're going to talk about our original review and what mistakes we think we made during it. So disregard everything you heard us say in that first video. What we're about to give you is the real reason why we don't like this episode.
So, this episode is about Star, who, after receiving a magic wand, is sent to a safer dimension, which is Earth. There, she meets Marco, and they get off to a slightly bumpy start. After a large monster battle, they do end up becoming friends, and that's the basic summary of this episode's plot.
Just looking at the plot on its own, it feels like this episode should work. But there's one reason in particular why we didn't enjoy it. One that didn't occur to us when we first tried to talk about this episode a few months back. The main issue with this episode is that it moves way too fast. Within 11 minutes, this episode tries to establish Star, establish her world, establish the wand, have Star be unable to control her powers, send her to Earth, establish Marco, have her meet Marco, establish their relationship, establish Marco's parents, have Marco get fed up, establish the villain, have a minute-long fight scene, have Star make up to Marco, and end the episode. That's a lot of stuff to handle for such a short time slot.
And because of this, the episode felt very rushed. If it was a half-hour episode, maybe this would have been better. But since it isn't, they were forced to cram in tons of stuff into this 11-minute thing. This makes the viewing experience less for us in particular, even if it does have some nice jokes.
And yes, having a fast-paced plot can lead to good comedy, because quick energy does make jokes funnier, but there is a limit to how fast a comedy should move forward, and this episode clearly went over it. While there are some funny jokes, there are also other jokes that feel like they need more build-up and context. For instance, that scene where the laser puppies start destroying Marco's house, and then Marco's parents just stare on with creepy smiles, seemingly unaware of what damage is being done. With how quickly it's there and gone, the joke here doesn't leave much of an impact. However, the joke still could have worked, and in fact, I have seen it made to work by this same show. There was another episode of Star vs. the Forces of Evil where Star takes Marco's parents to her home world, and they keep ending up in mortal danger, all the while never noticing it. The joke is a lot funnier there because it makes Marco's experience more awkward and keeps on building and building.
Even though those puppies are cute, they need more build-up, more power. The scene with Marco and the cacti was also a pretty funny joke, but after that, it cuts to Marco being super insane outside of a supermarket. The random jump there felt kinda awkward to me. And the joke of him acting like he belongs in a mental asylum wasn't the best thing either. His weirdness was a bit over the top for my tastes, but that's just me.
And while we're on the subject of awkward jokes, I might as well bring up my least favorite joke in the episode.
Frankly, I like taking risks and would welcome a little danger in my life.
I will admit, that was a bit weird. Yet, somehow, it got a chuckle out of me. I don't know how, but it did.
For me, though, it just felt too out of nowhere to really hit home. Most of the jokes in this episode about Star's magic had Star trying to use the wand and having the spells go wrong in unexpected ways. But with this joke, Star was clearly trying to make a monster appear, I guess to satisfy Marco's appetite for danger. But with how fast it breezes by, it winds up making Star look more creepy than anything. Perhaps if they built up to the monster appearing a little bit more, it could have been a funny punchline. But with how suddenly it comes and goes, it doesn't sit well with me.
And that's that's often the case for most jokes. With that out of the way, we can move on to the villain and his henchmen. The villain is kinda lame. A super tiny guy who wants to be powerful kind of thing. They do use this character to do some funny things in the future, though.
Maybe it's just the guy's voice acting, or maybe it's just how little screen time he gets, but I don't find myself laughing at this guy's antics. His shtick seems more awkward than it is funny. Later episodes of this show would build jokes around him or have silly things happen to him, which I found funny. But just him on his own doesn't do much for me, and this episode didn't have much time to do anything other than show him and his not particularly interesting main shtick.
The retreating like losers part at the end was kind of funny, and his henchmen do have pretty interesting designs. I can tell the crew of this show had fun making all of these characters. And then finally, the episode ends with the two making up. Okay, so throughout this redo, I've explained why I dislike and also enjoy the various parts of this episode. Altogether, I'd give this whole thing a rating of 3.3. There were good parts and bad parts, but the whole thing just didn't do much, period. I commend the writers for managing to cram everything into an episode of this length, even if they could have done it a bit smoother.
This just moves too fast and tries to do too much for its own good. I don't feel like I've been given enough time to adjust to anything, or get to know this world before the episode cuts off. Sure, there were some funny bits, but there were also some bits that felt really lackluster. When the episode ended, I felt really hollow and unfulfilled. There were hints of potential here and there, but the episode didn't really give me much of a reason to want to stick around. I'd give this a solid 2.5 out of 5. The very middle ranking. Perhaps if this episode didn't try and jam too many ideas into one 11-minute time slot, it could have had more time to focus on making what it had as funny and entertaining as possible. But as it stands, between the scattered comedy and the way too fast pacing, I just didn't find much that really stayed with me or made me want to know more.
Now, we're going to talk about our original video. I personally will admit, I was way over the top and critical in this review. Cobalt and I were both very stressed that weekend, and in my stressedness, things came out wrong. I said things that I don't actually mean in the present day, and I regret a lot of my decisions. I sounded really bitter, really negative, and I have absolutely no idea what was going through my head. I think that led towards volcanic horribleness. It burned down Hawaii, seriously. Why? It's a moth. They're supposed to be cute. Star, you ruined it for the world. Star is stupid. Regrets!
There's a way to be over-the-top negative while being funny, but here it felt like the both of us sounded a bit too bitter for our own good. And I'll admit that a lot of that bitterness probably wasn't directed towards the episode itself, but towards the stress we were going through trying to plan out when to work on our video. We wrote this script the same weekend as the Alone Together video, and if there's anything to be learned from this, it's that writing 2 scripts in one weekend was a terrible idea.
This was also right before we were doing the Valentine's Day list, and the pre-planning stress for that also added. I definitely see why people disliked the video, because I disliked it too.
Now, I've already told you that the real reason why a lot of these jokes didn't work for us is because they moved too fast and didn't have enough build-up. When we wrote that script, we were not aware of that reason at all, and so, to make up for it, we wound up picking apart a lot of individual jokes and pulling reasons out of nowhere as to why they were bad. We called things cliché, as if that was an inherently bad thing. It's not, and painted harmless slapstick as being disturbing and creepy.
Let's put all of those horrible jokes to rest with this video. It's kind of a shame. There were some things that we said in that video that were funny, and other things that were just no.
One of the mistakes that I made in the video that was exclusive to me was how I talked about Star. In that video, I said that Star's behavior oftentimes seemed more creepy and disturbing than funny. I want to like this character, but honestly, she sort of seems like a destructive force. I'll elaborate more as we go on, but for every charming thing she does, there's a really chaotic and creepy thing she does to go alongside it. Look, Star, I want to like you, but all this overly chaotic chaos is getting in the way! We're supposed to get the idea that she isn't quite in control of her magic, but all the after effects of her misused spells are way too big and disastrous to be funny to me. I want to get into this character, but all I can think about is how terrified of her I would be if I actually met her. Maybe the king and queen were right the first time. Send this whirling dervish to reform school and iron her out. I called out multiple scenes with her as showing off behavior that looked, to use my own words, more psychotic than well-meaning. But really, looking back at the episode, most of the chaos she caused could be attributed to accidents. The episode wanted to establish that Star wasn't in control of her powers, and to do that, it showed plenty of magic spells gone wrong. Really, the only thing that Star did in the episode that could genuinely be seen as unsettling is her making a monster appear in front of Marco, which I already talked about a few minutes ago. This was a very careless oversight on my part, and one that probably would have gone away had I watched the episode more than once before reviewing it. Then again, we tried to rush the script out as fast as possible, so there wasn't any time for that. But while we're talking about our original review, we should quickly acknowledge how people responded to it.
Some of the comments on the original video were pretty mean, and we just wanted to briefly mention that nobody should be mean on the internet to anyone. You're allowed to not like something, but there's a polite way to say it. Some people did politely tell us, but not everyone. And on that note, we will end this redo review.
But before we close this off, I just want to direct your attention to one more thing we put in the original video, the disclaimer.
Even back then, we considered our opinions as being open to change.
You can't always judge a show based on its first episode, because a show doesn't always hit the mark the first time around. Shaky premiere episodes are nothing new, and this is just another one of those. So keep this in mind if we ever review another premiere episode. If we say that we didn't like the first episode of a show, you shouldn't take it too seriously, because shows do have the ability to change. And this show definitely did change for the better after this first attempt.
I personally do enjoy this series, even if I didn't enjoy the first 2 episodes. We all have episodes that we don't like in a series. But with that final note, thank you so much for giving this a peek, and we'll see you in our next actual review. Adios!